Hello everybody, welcome back to Bally the Mist Block of the Month. I'm Adriane Ritter.
And I'm Shelley McNeely.
And we are here for our October 2021 Block of the Month. Shelley created this block, or was inspired to work on this block. We don't really have a name for it. It's a 7 patch, which we can call it 7 patch. Yeah. Old patchy.
It's kind of a 9 patch that you didn't have to do
2 of the patches.
Yeah.
You leave them.
Yeah.
You leave them sewn together.
Yep.
You don't cut them apart. So it's a pretty straightforward block.
Right.
There is a little bit of trickiness because there's a slight variation in size on this center strip. So that's probably the trickiest part. Is
because we're trying to do it a little oversized, you can trim. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, you just complicated it by saying that. So, okay. So, number 1, make sure you go to the website to get the instructions. I am trying to include them in the notes that accompany the video, but if you want one with photos for more detail, I can't put photos in the notes. So.
Right.
All right, Shelley.
Okay.
Tell us about fabric.
Okay, so this year, as most years how we've been doing this, we need a focus fabric, like this one, or hers.
Yeah, that's my focus.
A coordinating fabric, and then 2 neutrals. I have a light and a dark, which tends to work better. And that can be, grays, browns, like that.
Okay. So as she's explaining what the pieces are, I'm gonna kind of try to show on this finished block where we use them.
Okay, so now for what we're calling these like fabric 1, 2, 3, and 4. So instead
and really only fabric 1 is the only one that's different.
Right.
Okay, so
right.
Just remember we just want you to use all 4 of your fabrics.
Right.
Okay.
So fabric 1, you're gonna need 2 4 3/4 inch squares.
These ones go on the outside.
And 1 4.5 inch square.
Okay.
And then for fabrics 2, 3, and 4, okay, you're gonna need a strip of each that's 26.5 inches long. Or if you don't have that,
or if you want to use up some of the scrap pieces that you have.
Right, you're gonna need 2, this is of each of the 3, 2 of each, that are 8 3/4 inches, and 2 that are 4.5 inches. That's the length.
Okay, and they can, and just to clarify that a little bit, the totals of your strips need to come out to the 26.5?
Right.
26.5, but they can be broken up into smaller pieces that you want to use up. So like in this case, this piece will represent one of the 8 3/4, and this piece is all the rest of the length. Right. But in my focus fabric, I have 2 that are a different conglomeration. So you just need to be able to get 3. We're going to sew together these strip sets, and you need to be able to get these pieces that are either 8 3/4 of the strip set or 4.5.
Right. So now the width. Okay, so we're going to be sewing these together on the long. So when you lay them next to each other.
Here, let me move this. Or like this, yeah, like these.
When you lay them next to each other, they can be whatever width you determine, but when laying it together before they're sewn, they need to be 5 3/4 inches.
That's when they're sewn,
right.
Or before they're after this?
Before they're sewn.
Before they're sewn.
Right. And then when they're sewn, they need to be at least 4 3/4 inches. So
okay, so that was kind of confusing. So I'm going to clarify that just a little bit. So if you're inches, and the fabrics, what she's trying to say is they don't have to be the same width.
Right.
And even between different chunks of them, the individual 3 don't have to be the same width. If it was this wide here, it can be narrower here. Say my focus fabric.
And they don't have to be perfectly rectangular either.
Right. They can be kind of weird shaped pieces, right, as long as you account for that and can get that width out of it, right, of 4 3/4.
Right.
Now, the other thing that when you do the math on these, that comes out to an average of about 2 inches wide for each of the pieces. But if you have one that's, and I wouldn't do one that's seriously, I wouldn't do like a 3-inch wide.
And a 1 inch wide.
And 1 inch wide, because it's going to be really narrow. I mean, you could. It's your choice. You can look at it. But, I mean, it certainly, they can be different. Like Shelley can show in hers. Hers are different widths, her little sample ones there.
Right.
That she has there for short pieces.
Yeah.
So basically what I did, I kind of just thought, I just aimed for almost 2 inches wide on my, when I was going through my scrap pieces.
Right.
And I pulled those out, and then I put them together to see that I got the width we needed.
Right.
Okay? So the first step that we're going to do is, after you find that fabric, we're going to take, and you need to sew together these strip sets. And the only requirement we have is that sew them in the same order. Okay? Right. So if you have one of your, like if I put my gray in the middle, I want the gray in the middle on all of the sets that I sew together. Now that's the only one that matters, because obviously I can turn it around and get them in the right order. So it's just make sure the one in the middle is the same. Okay, so we're going to sew together our strip sets and come back, and we will talk about the cutting at that point. Right. Okay, if you've got like weird pieces that, you know, they don't match up right, you know, you can, you know, like I'll probably cut off part of this gray and sew it to, you know, to another one. So I just have to be able to get those cut pieces. I know that's really confusing. Right. So the easiest thing might be, if you've got little pieces, is make sure you get 2 8 3/4 and 2 4 1/2 out of each color. Right. And do that, and then sew them together.
And if you're more comfortable cutting them to the lengths before you sew them together, just do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying to do. Do that.
All the pieces.
Oh yeah, even if you have a long piece.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we'll do that and we'll be back. Okay, so we have our strip sets sewn. We didn't talk about pressing. On this segment that we just did, I would just press to your darker fabric. Right. It doesn't matter. The way they arrange, they don't really intersect. Right. Okay, so if you had long strip sets, this is now at the point where you're going to cut the strip sets down to, so you have 2 8 3/4 inch long sets and 2 sets that are 4 1/2. Okay, now while you're doing that, I would just glance and make sure they're at least 4 3/4 wide also. And the reason why this works, why we can have a different width in the center, in this center block, which is 4 1/2, is because we cut these to 4 1/2, and that's, so it's kind of, it's a little bit strange when you think about it, but you have to make sure you turn the pieces the right way. So now we're going to talk about that. We're going to arrange the pieces. So how do we arrange them, Shelley? Okay,
so we want one of the outer ones of the strips you've made to be border around the center.
I think we should start with arranging these
you're right.
pieces.
We should, yes.
Okay.
The smaller square, the 4 1/2 inch square, goes in the center. And then the other 2 squares go on diagonal, so you have a diagonal.
It doesn't matter which way you arrange the diagonal, because you could turn it and it's the same.
And now there's our 4 strips.
So obviously by looking at this, you've got, I think these are obvious, you know, because there's a big piece, so it's going to go in a big place.
Right.
And so you've got another one and you put it in the big spot.
Right.
And the way to remember that these are oriented correctly is what Shelley was saying, is that you're going to pick one of your strip set fabrics, so one of the outer 2 fabrics, and that's going to hug around this center block.
Right.
So like all my white face the center. So I know that I have it wrong if I have it like this. If I have stripes going that way, you know, it should be a solid that goes against that center block. And it should be the same color. It should be a solid piece of fabric, not a strip set. You know, yeah, so the same color should always go around that block.
Right. And you can pick which.
Yeah, so it could be either way. You're going to look at it, it could go either way.
Yeah.
But don't do these ones different. Do these ones in the center the same as you do the outer 2.
Right.
Okay. So that's the trickiest part of this block.
Right.
So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to sew these rows.
Right.
And so you're going to sew the top row. The top row and the bottom row are the same. You can stack them and lay them and just sew a 3-piece to a corner, a 3-piece to a corner. And then these ones you're just going to sew through the smaller of your 3 squares, the 4.5 inch. You're going to sew 2 of the small pieces and press them to your fabric 1.
Right. To the square.
To the square. Don't press, and it's kind of like how we say, press to the less complicated.
Right.
So this has, it's been pieced, so there's some seams already there, so it would be lumpy if you press to those. So you're going to press to these solid pieces.
Right.
Okay, and then we'll be back and we will have our 3 rows. All right, we have our strips sewn into the rows,
Right.
all of those. But I do want to back up a little bit. Shelley pointed out to me while we were sewing something that we kind of forgot to talk about. When we told you to make your strip sets, you know, about 5 3/4 total, or when they're sewn 4 3/4 wide,
Right.
they didn't have to be exactly that. They kind of needed to be that width, but they could be wider. And the reason for that is because the way these strips come together, at the end you're going to trim off the extra. But when you're sewing together the squares to the strip set, always put, and it only matters in these 2 in the rows with the longer strip sets, put the square, match the corner of the same piece, and it's going to be the inside piece. So in this case, I needed to match up exactly the corner of my of this corner with the white corner, so that the extra is at the top. So that's going to give me a nice straight edge to sew this center piece onto it. And the same way down here, I matched that, and then the extra hangs down. And that gives you a little bit of extra for the trimming at the end. But you do want to have that inner edge match up. If it doesn't match up, if you've already done that and it's off, then at this point you can just trim it down to the 5 3/4, and then you'll have a straight edge. You really should only have it
4 3/4.
I'm sorry, 4 3/4. You really should only have extra if your strip set width was a little bit more than the
Right.
4 3/4. If it's right on, it should match.
Right.
Okay. So now you're going to lay out your 3 rows. Obviously, the 3-piece one is in the middle. The other 2 that are the same, you just flip one around, so you have them. Now, if you press them to your fabric 1, when you fold this down to sew these 2 rows together, these 2 should nest against each other, and then you have it lined up right.
Right.
And then the same with the bottom row, that this block should nest into the one above it. So we're going to sew those 3 together and then press it, and I think like normal, one of us will have ours trimmed and one won't probably when we come back.
Right.
All right, so we have our finished blocks, and I have mine that's trimmed and Shelley's isn't, but before she shows you that, I want to mention, and you can see that between mine and Shelley's blocks, but a little easier maybe if I show you between my 2 blocks because the fabrics are similar.
Right.
I did my diagonals, I did this one a couple days ago, and so when I did this one I wasn't really looking at it, and one of them I did my rows going right to left, and the other one I did them going left to right. So they're not the same. And if you're going to make multiples and you care that they're the same, it's kind of a subtle difference, but it has to do with this piece that sticks out here longer. You need to either go all with your triangles going this way or all of them going this way to keep it the same. Otherwise, I can turn it and the triangles go the same direction, but you can see the pieces look different.
Yeah.
Okay, and Shelley and I's on today I did this one today the opposite way.
Right.
So it's a very minor difference,
Right.
but if you care, then watch it.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
on the squaring up, if you're going to cut it to like look like a wonky thing like we do this year, then just lay your ruler on it, make sure you have fabric under all of it, and trim it. And that's all you need to do. If you want it to be symmetrical,
Right.
the way to do that is if you have a square up ruler, normal square up rulers have one diagonal already printed on them right here. But we've taken and put this little thin line tape to make the two diagonals. And to get it squared up, you just want to take that diagonal so it goes through the points of this square and through the points this way. And if you do that, then your piece will be fine.
Right.
Now, Shelley, when she designed this block, did oversize it a little to give you some room to not have perfect 1/4 inch seams.
Right.
If you see that one of yours is a little off, or like in my case, I had one of my strip sets that I really kind of cheated a little bit. I didn't quite have the right 4 3/4, but I knew the other set was wider. So between the two sides, I was going to be okay. So just watch that. Just watch if you've cheated a little bit on the width on one place to make sure that you can get there's fabric under your ruler.
And if you want it wonky, it doesn't even matter as long as the ruler fits.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, I mean, I had plenty. To keep mine very straight, I was actually like a 1/4 of an inch off on what I needed, but it was okay. I had exactly the right amount.
Right.
But luckily, the extra or lack of extra goes to the outside of this block.
Right.
And so you can adjust for that in the trimming.
Right.
Okay, so as you can see, simple block. We're finishing the year. We're trying to keep it easy. We're starting to come into holiday season, and we
Yes.
know people get busy. So we have 2 more blocks to finish out the year. They're super fun, easy blocks,
Right.
and just hope you stay with us.
Yes.
And we'll see you next month.
Right.